Okay, so quick emergency video about what's going on this week with regards to the continuing resolution and all the back and forth you're going to see. And then I have some thoughts on it. So, first off, what's happening today in the House? They're trying to pass, I guess they're calling it a clean CR. So, that's a clean, which means there's not a whole bunch of other stuff added on, continuing resolution, which means basically whatever we've been spending this year, we're just going to keep going in that direction. So that's what they're trying to pass. My hope is that there are no Democrats that actually vote for this thing. And Republicans already have one, Tom Massey of Kentucky, that said he's going to vote against it. So it's going to be very tough for them to pass. But what they're intending to do is we always called it jam the Senate. So here's the deal. The Senate still is a body that tends to produce kind of negotiated documents, negotiated solutions. So if the House is not able to pass a thing that gets us past the government shutdown, then typically you'll see the senators come together, find something they can agree on, they'll pass it and send it to the House. And then that puts House in the awkward position of yes or no, and then they hold the bag if the government shuts down. What they're trying to do now is jam the Senate. So they're trying to pass something to send it to the Senate to put Senate Republicans in the awkward position of having to either vote yes or no on this and, bring it up for a vote, that kind of stuff. So it's what you're seeing right now is a lot of internal kind of Senate versus House dynamics that are going on. You'll hear the term jam the Senate or jam the House all the time. And that just means they're trying to leave them holding the bag. So this continuing resolution, just a quick primer on how all this works. So you have an appropriation process. So of all the government agencies, the appropriation committee is supposed to pass the agreed upon spending levels in details. This is where you get into the details of spending, not just a top line number, the details. And then the House and Senate are supposed to pass this and sign it into law. And you do this a little over a dozen times, and the government's funded for the fiscal year. That's how we used to do it. Obviously, with all the division now, it never gets done that way. So you come up to a government shutdown deadline, the end of appropriations. And usually what ends up happening is an omnibus, which means we're jamming all those over a dozen bills together and passing them in one thing. That's when you always see people complain that it's a 5,000-page bill, nobody's read it, that kind of stuff. You have sometimes things called mini buses, which is just taking a few of those bills at a time and passing them like that. And then when you have a completely failed government, usually not in a government that one party has complete control over. So that's a little different this time. Continuing resolutions, which is like, hey, we're not going to come to an agreement, but we don't want to shut the government down, so we'll continue. Continuing resolutions are terrible for, frankly, any agency, but ones that concern me, Department of Defense, etc., who can't stop programs or start programs because they don't have the authority in the budget to do that because they're, again, operating on usually last year's blueprint or what they've been operating. So let's say there's a new fighter jet that is $5 a copy in essence, right? So it's dirt cheap. We want to pass it. In theory, unless they get what's called an anomaly, which is a specific thing on a continuing resolution, they cannot start that new program because, again, they don't have the budget authority to do it. So that's why continuing resolutions are really bad. Let's talk about the politics of this. So Republicans control all of government. So it is on the Republicans, particularly in this unique time, that the Republicans have got to be the ones to come up with a reason or a way to fund the government. Not a reason, a way to fund the government. What they're trying to do, because they know they're going to have difficulty doing it, because again, as I mentioned in the House, they don't have, a huge margin to play with. And in the Senate, they still have the 60 vote rule. So that's a big issue, but a lot of people don't understand that. So what they're dealing with now is basically, how do we try to put the blame on the Democrats despite the fact that we fully control government? This is where the messaging is so important. Now back up a second. This morning, I had seen an interview with Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, a Democrat, who said, I guess previous to that, he had made a comment somewhere that he goes, I'm not a shutdown guy. I've seen other Democrats say this. Well, I'm not a big believer in government shutdowns. I want to warn them repeatedly against that language. When you say, I'm not a shutdown guy, I don't like shutting down the government, I typically vote to keep the government open, those kinds of things. what you're doing is taking ownership of whatever happens, because you're saying, look, I can play a constructive role. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I can. What that does, it gives the Republicans the ability, and they're already messaging this, to blame you for a government shutdown. Hey, boy, we had such a good bill and they didn't vote for it for politics. Okay. Now, maybe in any other kind of time that would work, right? If we were in a normal time with a normal president and we were in a normal appropriations process, then you could say, look, the other side needs to come in and play ball, particularly if we're putting forward a clean CR. So there's nothing controversial in it. But this is a very different moment. If Democrats pass this, or if, let's say, Republicans pass it without Democratic votes, you have taken away all ability for the rest of the fiscal year till the end of September, all ability for Democrats to have a say in what happens in government. So let's talk about Doge. You know, Elon Musk rolling around with a chainsaw, giggling while he's worth $500 billion, giggling at the benefits he's cutting, at everything he's cutting for the American people. The Democrats have an opportunity in this to say, look, we want accountability for where these cuts are coming. We're Congress, we're the Senate, we have every right to have this. And that would be a very defensible position. Or let's think about the pullout of Ukraine, or potentially vacating NATO. Where is it that Congress has any power whatsoever? It's all in the power of the purse, the power of spending. If you pass a clean continuing resolution, you are giving all that up until October 1st. And we know it's only been 8 weeks since Donald Trump's been in office. We know what can happen between now and the end of September. So Democrats have got to quit messaging anything about, gee, I generally like to keep the government open. We'll see. You have no authority in this. This is all a question of whether Republicans are willing to come to you to keep the government open. Are they willing to have negotiations? Some of those negotiations may be, gosh, Doge needs to be accountable. Or gosh, maybe we should reopen the aid to Ukraine. This is where you have that authority. So my big message in all of this is to say if you see a Democrat saying that, I typically like to keep the government open. Gosh, I don't like shutting down the government. Tell them to stop, because you don't own this government shutdown. But I guarantee you, if it happens, the Republicans will spend 90% of their messaging effort pinning this on you. And they could win that, because as we've seen, honestly, Democrats are not very good at messaging right now. And so they could end up owning this despite the fact that they have no levers of government. So look, the answer is very simple. We are willing to come to the table with the Republicans to bail them out. But, obviously we've got to have a say in what this looks like. I get it. We're not going to have 90% of the say in what government funding looks like, but we should get at least, look, we represent 45% of seats in the House and Senate. Maybe we should get 45% of a say. Or maybe these things that most Americans agree on, i.e., Doge shouldn't be cutting without a blueprint, we can put that in the bill. So message it clearly. This is the Republicans' problem. This is not the Democrats' problem. If we go into a shutdown, it's because they can't get their own house in order. And if they really want our help, that's fine. Come to the table and talk to us. So this is what we're going to be watching this week. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments in terms of any of this process, in terms of messaging or details about CRs. I'm happy to answer that. But otherwise, have a great week, and this is what we're going to be watching. I'll probably do another one or two of these videos.